hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. The world is waking up, and this is the tipping point. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott McKay. I am your host for The Tipping Point this evening. It is great to have you all here. We got an exciting night with some updates on what is happening in the world of the deep state takedown of the power structure on the planet that has controlled not only this country and government for a very long time, but most countries all over the world. And we've had some interesting developments that I'm looking forward to sharing with you tonight, at least my perspective, that is. And talk a little bit about Revolution Radio here for a minute. Welcome you all from around the world, being that this is online internet radio. We have guests from different parts of the world that are on tonight. We welcome you. We celebrate you as patriots of your own nation, also in the battle for your freedom and the struggle for your individual rights. And that's why we're here. It's why we exist. It's why this program was started. And Revolution Radio is the linchpin of our ability to be able to speak our thoughts freely and not be censored. Many of you have your favorite YouTube channels and some other online platforms that you like to listen to, but what we've learned over the last year, probably 2 years now, that big tech has a stranglehold on the free flow of information, just as the mainstream media has for many decades. So one of the things I like to talk about here is the importance of maintaining the freedom of speech on a platform like this. So Revolution Radio, folks, is a private online platform. This radio has survived for 15 years on the donations by the general public to keep this machine operating. So if you find any of your hosts on here, there's some very incredible shows on this platform 24/7 through two different studios. If you find some worthwhile hosts and programs and topics to listen to, we certainly do appreciate you being able to help support this channel. And if you choose to, if you're on revolution.radio, as you would be here to listen to this show, you can see at the top of the screen on that platform, become a patron. And there's a Patreon link where you could donate there. We have had a couple of attacks on our ability to fund through, take donations through PayPal. Once again, this is big tech censoring, trying to keep certain platforms being able to monetize, to survive, to continue to bring this information to you. So there's a couple other mediums here. There is a Patreon link. Also, you'll notice at the top left-hand corner of the screen, there's a link that says donations. And you, of course, can put your information in there to, I'm bringing this up on my screen now so I can just look at it clearly. I think I have a slow internet here, but you can make a donation with your credit card on the site. One of our producers, Lady Horse, 1957, she has this account set up in this platform that goes directly to this particular cause. And also, if you scroll to the bottom, if you so choose, you can also send some snail mail. And there is an address right underneath the thank you button that says snail mail made out to Revolution Radio, addressed to Terry Ackerman, one of our producers. And that's 1793 North Eden, Edon Road in Allen, Michigan, 49227. So again, we do appreciate your support, allowing us to have a free voice and bring you the uncensored, unadulterated, unabashed, and unapologetic truth on programs here like The Tipping Point. Folks, when we talked over the last several weeks about why we decided to get started on this program, and I know there's some new folks coming on, so I do cover a little bit of ground each week to bring some people up to speed who have just been introduced to The Tipping Point, of why we're here, what we plan on doing, and the shadow of darkness that sometimes that this program will bring you in telling you the truth, but we will always cap it off with a ray of light that is going to be coming your way, it's going to be coming our way on a global scale once this operation to take down this corrupt criminal power structure is complete. So there's one thing I've been holding back on for the last several weeks, and I may blurt it out tonight. And I'm not leading witnesses here or throwing a line in the water with no bait on it, just to tease you. But I'm going to do some more research. I'm going to put a little more time in the waiting game on some things that I think are truly going to shock humanity on a global scale in bringing legitimacy to this takedown operation. Some of you folks are following it. I'm sure many of you are not. This program is considered the red pill in the Matrix. If you've ever watched Keanu Reeves in the Matrix, in the very beginning, Keanu Reeves has an opportunity and is given a choice to take the blue pill, go back into his comfortable world and sleep in a matrix that operates without any input or any control and be a slave to that matrix for life, or he can swallow the red pill. And the only thing that can be promised to things is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And there's no going back once you know the truth. So we're here to expose the truth about things that have bothered me for 2.5 decades in my time, either in active elective politics, or being as a sideline observer for 10 years when I walked away from that space back in 2006, when it occurred to me after 16 years of putting time in and helping people get elected, that I realized there's something bigger in play here. There's a reason why these people go to Washington, D.C. They get inside that beltway, and regardless of how principled, maybe how conservative they may be, at least in terms of fiscally, when it comes to social issues, I tend to lean conservative, but I'm also a libertarian. I believe God gave us freedom and free will to conduct our lives how we choose. So how people choose to do that is truly up to them, because that's what freedom is all about. If there are things I don't agree with, fantastic. Live your life how you want to, what makes you happy. Just don't expect me to pay for it, and don't throw it at me. That's kind of the way I see it. But I would see people get inside the beltway, and especially on fiscal issues, just continue to shaft us, shaft America, shaft our future generations over and over and over, and it would never stop. And my wake-up call was under the Bush administration, number 2, W. Bush, who I actually worked at campaign in both elections, 2000, 2004, served as a precinct captain in Los Angeles, served on the Central Committee, managed a statewide assembly race with a great candidate out there, Mark Eisler, in a district we probably could have won. That was a heavy Democrat district. And when I talk Democrat and Republican people on the show, do understand something. I've got a lot of friends that are Democrats who I care about, I love deeply, great people. We have some differing ideologies and different passions, but the simple reality is what this power structure has been very effective at doing to all of us is breaking us down and dividing us into groups and then pitting us against each other. So when I talk tonight about this power structure and updates of what's happening, we'll talk about Agenda 21, going to talk about certain truths that mainstream media refuse to cover. We're going to talk about some of the latest intelligence drops this week, keeping us, those who are now in know, up to date on this information that's coming out, so we can see this thing play out and be prepared, and then educate those who are not in the realm of understanding it. But the whole Democrat Republican thing, folks, is window dressing. Some of you have heard me say this before. I could never figure out how it is in Washington, D.C. these people attack each other, and then they go out to dinner at night on their government credit cards, paid for by us, the best restaurants in Georgetown, travel together, dine together, vacation together, but they appear to be enemies ideologically and politically, and insult each other in front of the cameras and all the things they do. And it occurred to me that that is nothing more than a show. That's Broadway at its finest acting. That is their role. the vast majority, and I do mean the vast majority, are controlled by the power structure. They're controlled through bribery. They're controlled through threats. They're controlled through intimidation, money, you name it. Once these people get in that beltway, they're pretty much owned. And if you're not in a position to be owned, you don't get inside the beltway. And that's when I walked away in 2006. I spent a lot of years in my life. My target in my life was the United States Senate, was my dream, was my goal for 20 years. And I was going to work my way through the business world instead of climbing over the wreckage of active politics and creating a profile that way, because I knew I'd probably become just like the rest of them. And I worked toward a business profile that would allow me to, at some point, have created enough wealth so nobody could own me. And I would have some life outside of that realm, and I would make my play there. But that all ended by 2006 when I realized what this whole thing was all about. Quite honestly, good friend of mine said, Scott, very wise man, former mentor of mine, pardon me, said, Scott, you'll never last. You're too honest. You're not the kind of people that they want. So anyways, again, coming back to Democrats versus Republicans, folks, the crime and corruption is on both sides of the aisle. You've heard me talk week in and week out that there's going to be a tremendous wipeout on the Democratic side with all the crime and corruption, which is evident with what we've seen in this continued attempted takedown of our president, our duly elected president. And it's on full display. And the purpose of this military intelligence dissemination operation is to have this thing play out in the public, in the open eye, so everybody can see exactly who these people are, what they're doing to the country, what their agenda is, which is the implementation of a one world government, new world order, full control of people, population control, control of all resources, control of how we live, where we live, right down to the last nail. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen for them. I know at this point they've put decades in this. The acceleration point was under H.W. Bush, his election in 1988 and through 1992. Some terrible things were set in motion there to put us on this track to this Agenda 21 agenda for the 21st century and this new world order. Anyway, so I'm going to jump forward here to some of the things about some of the truths that the media absolutely refuse to cover. And unfortunately, I don't know if you all can hear this, but in my microphone, it seems like I have a dog off in the distance that is howling or making some noises. So I apologize if that's coming through on your end. This is a very sensitive studio mic, picks up just about everything. Anyways, here's what fascinates me about the mainstream media. Let's put the lies aside for a minute. They exist on a staggering scale. But what's amazing to me, and I say this probably week in, week out, I don't understand how people can watch, I call it the idiot box, and sit there night after night watching this thing and being fed information, not just about the political dynamic in this country, but about the world in general on any particular topic of life, and continue to buy into it. I was trying to watch a couple of TV shows this past week just to try to discover what it is that people are watching, whether they're game shows, reality shows, whatever. And I have to tell you, people, it's no wonder that our test scores in the wealthiest, most innovative country in the world have dropped to about 48 in the world out of all the countries that track their education system results. I can see why that happens. I see the ridiculousness that we call programming that they put on a television, and I sit and think to myself, people actually watch this stuff. I mean, they actually feed their brain this. And here's the thing about being protective of what you allow go into your mind, folks. I had many years, I was in the world of competitive bodybuilding. I was on the national stage, I retired fairly young. I had other interests in life, but I had a relatively successful career. But my life for certainly a dozen years was devoted to ingesting the things that would advance me in my space and my interest in life in that world. So I was very controlling and very protective of what I would feed my body that would create the best environment for the type of growth that I needed in that space. Now, when it comes to the human mind, what people don't understand is the mind operates like every other muscle in the body. It has to be fed, and it has to be fed properly. They've done incredible neurological uh, studies and diagnostics and MRI scans on brains that are fed certain types of it, different types of energy, different energy frequencies of information over a period of time. And you can see this structural change happening to it. And if we look at just the way our lives turn out, the way we think, I've come to realize the most important thing that I can get control of in my life is what goes into my mind. So much to the point that over the last 25 years, I have been on this pathway to actively and assertively program my mind with different philosophical ideas or even thought processes that would be conducive to my long-term intellectual development, my own human consciousness, my potential to do different things in life. I've actively invested and spent time and money doing these things because I could look at the world around me and I could see that what we feed our mind is what becomes our reality, just like our bodies, no different. So I've even come to the conclusion that I was a big AC/DC fan. I loved really hardcore, aggressive rock because when I would go into the gym to train at that level, you were inflicting an enormous amount of intensity and stress and strain on your body, and your mind has to be prepared to endure that in the competitive bodybuilding. So I would program my mind with that aggressive, that the lyrics, the sound, the music, because I needed to have this mindset and this energy field of rage inside of me to perform, to move, very heavy weight loads to force muscle to grow. And I realized at a certain point in time, right about 2010, I started to study quantum physics about 6 years before that. But I started to realize, actually, it was in 2010, it was 2008, I started to realize that the energy frequency that comes off of that kind of music is a lower frequency. And it was having some, I wouldn't say adverse neurological effects on me. I guess that's probably the wrong way to put it, but it certainly was having a detrimental effect on the way I thought, saw things, maybe my temperament. But I wanted to change that. And in one day I stopped listening to that kind of music and I started listening to country music. Getting off on a tangent here as I usually do. But I can tell you that I grew a sense of peace in my soul once I quit listening to that kind of music. Now, I occasionally will listen to it. I probably go to a concert just for the fun of it, but I don't subject my mind to that because I know what it made me feel like and respond like in situations in life as a person. And I just felt a general sense of peace and optimism when I switched over to modern country music. And I can tell you this: my father, he's a news junkie, and he's sat in front of the TV for years, watching the news. And honest to goodness, it was hard to have a conversation with him for a long time because every time we spoke, it was just he was angry, upset at what this power structure was doing to the world and doing to the country. And since he has not had cable TV for about 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, I've never heard him so peaceful and so optimistic and just enjoying life because he stopped putting all of that negative garbage in his mind. So, anyways, when it comes to the media, just to see not what they don't deliver to us, the truth, but what they put in place of it. And it's just, it's sad to me. So if I wanted to sound an alarm to you folks, I want to tell you this: it is critically important what you put in front of your eyes and your ears, what you put your children in front of, because believe me, that little brain in their skull is a blank hard drive. And once that is programmed, folks, there is no undoing it. It's there and it will produce what goes in there. So anyways, I'm hearing a lot of negativity out there with people because they're not seeing, things openly, overtly on the surface happen in this operation of destroying this deep state power structure, even though it seems like it's been on full attack for a couple of years since Trump stepped into power. So here's just a couple things. I'm going to read this off of one of my people I'm connected with on Twitter, CJ Truth, and just put up this week. Here's what's happening that you may not see on the surface of this takedown operation. This week, Chinese telecommunications conglomerate Huawei, which most of you know was tasked to roll out 5G across the US, which is a topic we won't get deeply into, but it is a very dangerous technology on human physiology. And if you haven't learned anything about that, please do Google, do your own research. As with everything else I speak on this show, I highly encourage you to do your own research. Don't take my word for anything I tell you any more than anything you hear in the news or anywhere else. It's critically important that you become a critical thinker. You become somebody who uses your own mind and form your own thoughts and opinions, but it does take time to do some research to validate some of the things I'm going to share with you. But the great thing about what we saw happen this past week, Huawei and subsidiaries have been charged in racketeering conspiracy to steal trade secrets. Big move. Of course, we now saw Jussie Smollett, the clown from Chicago that's on the TV show Empire, who created this hate hoax with two supposedly white MAGA hat wearing Trump supporters. It turned out to be two African Americans from Nigeria that launched this attack to beat him up, and he would blame it on a couple of white Trump supporters to create help some type of anti-lynching legislation get through Congress that was sponsored by Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. That's going to hit that investigation's underway. They're going to tie him, now that there's 6 charges, federal crimes of these hate crimes, this hoax or hate crimes against him. They're going to take this down this rabbit hole. Watch what happens there. So the good news is that is underway. Justice Department launches a legal assault to roll back sanctuary cities. Again, they're going to begin defunding these states and cities that are protecting criminal aliens who are raping, murdering, stealing, and doing whatever they're doing in this country. I think people have finally got to the point where we're finally fed up. No more political correctness on any of this. This is something that has to get underway. We look at AG Barr just announced that Rudy Giuliani had turned over to them his investigative information about all the corruption in Ukraine by the former administration. I think I've mentioned this the last week as well. You look at the people that are attacking Trump the most are always the ones that have the most to lose. We got Nancy Pelosi's son working for a Ukrainian oil company. We have Mitt Romney's son working for a Ukrainian oil company. We have Joe Biden's son working for a Ukrainian oil company. And we also have John Kerry's son working for a Ukrainian oil company. So these things that Rudy Giuliani and the corruption folks, believe me, goes far beyond Burisma and that whole mess. It goes right up to the top. That administration's direction and control of an overthrow of a duly elected president of Ukraine that had been lining himself with more so along Russian interests, because that particular president that was overthrown was aligning himself with Russia and Putin, because Putin has been fighting this deep state power structure by himself for a very long time. Now he's got some partners in the fight with him, which is Donald Trump and President Xi of China, which will bring me to the coronavirus topic that I'll talk about here in a little bit. Another thing, we see Trump going on a Twitter spree this week, talking about how nothing has ever happened to the crimes that Tony Podesta committed. That's John Podesta's brother, one of the most powerful lobbying firms in the world, immediately shut down once some of these things broke out into the open. We've never heard anything since, but there's something coming, because he was now put on the radar, Tony Podesta, by some tweets that Trump sent out. And I'll just tell you point blank, this is going to be tied to human trafficking, child sexual trafficking, satanic ritual abuse. Brace for impact on this subject, folks, because it is coming, and the exposure of this is going to be horrific. And it's pretty much one of the big things that's going to take down this power structure among elites in Washington, D.C. He also, this week, Donald Trump torched Judge Berman Jackson about these injustices in some of these sentences that were handed out to Manafort, but gave Hillary Clinton a pass on all the crimes that we know she's committed. Another good thing is we got Michael Avenatti. What's happening with this guy? Well, he's going to prison. He was found guilty this past week on all charges. So these are just some of the things, folks, that are happening in this takedown. If you can't see it, I'm pointing out these pieces. You have Roger Stone's sentencing. It was evaluated by AG Barr as being outrageous because here's a guy that supposedly lied to the FBI. He's going to get 9 years. So we've got, in this country, rape is a 3 to 5 year charge, but a guy lies to the FBI. We had, whether they lie to Congress or the FBI, it's all the same thing. We know for a fact John Brennan did. We know for a fact James Comey did. We know for a fact Hillary Clinton. We can go down through a list of people who have lied to Congress or lied to the FBI, Department of Justice, and they got nothing. Look at Andrew McCabe this week. Although there's a bright spot with Andrew McCabe, he may not be being prosecuted on charges that have to do with the investigation of the OIG report. However, there are investigations right now being conducted by John Durham, the U.S. attorney that I believe is a stealth bomber in this whole operation. And that's been underway for some time. See, folks, they're not going to try people on some of these small Mickey Mouse charges. They're holding back for these B-52 bombs they're going to drop when they're going to take these people into the either military tribunal or the Justice Department system to bring them to justice. So let's see what else happened this week. Oh, these 4 deep state prosecutors on the Mueller team that tried to recommend a 9-year sentence to Roger Stone, for Roger Stone, all of them resigned once Barr stepped in and was onto them. Let's see, we got another indictment on a couple of Chinese military hackers that broke into Equifax, a credit reporting agency, and they stole the information for about all the sensitive information for about half of all Americans. Let's see what else happened. We saw Trump fire Alexander Vindman, and his twin brother got tossed off the National Security Council with the ambassador, Gordon Sondland. He's gone. And we also have now 70 former holdovers on the National Security Advisory Committee or Council that were holdovers from the Obama administration. There's going to be a lot more, folks. That ballooned, I think, I heard over 410 positions in the National Security Council, which is absurd. When Obama came in, they just blew the government up massively. And hundreds and hundreds of thousands of new federal workers and federal positions, all paid by you folks. And let's see what else happened this past week. Lindsey Graham sent a letter to the Attorney General on last Friday, asking that he make 17 officials, many who are identified by title, available for interviews for a number of these things that came out during the impeachment. The impeachment, as I said last week, wasn't about removing Trump. It was about covering up the corruption and the crimes of the Democrats and some Republicans and trying to use that as a stall tactic. These people they're doing everything they can, folks, to try to save themselves. We also had John Durham stepping up, the U.S. attorney, that criticized John Brennan's handling of Russian interference in 2016. Guess what? That's now under investigation itself. We also have AG Barr installed an outside prosecutor who's going to review the whole case against General Flynn. I think I've talked a little bit about General Flynn in the past, but let me help you understand in this operation how General Flynn is basically a heroic, patriotic, sacrificial lamb in the operation. General Flynn gets caught on a phone call talking to an ambassador, a Russian ambassador, which is absolutely normal, always normal. Pardon me, I just look like I've got one of our guests that might be calling in right now. I'm going to have to text him. He's about an hour early. Sorry about that, folks. Anyways, that being said, I'll just look for a text if it comes back. General Flynn, here he is on a phone call, a legal, legitimate phone call, talking to a Russian ambassador during the transition from the election to taking over power. It's always standard. It's always normal. Administration's got to start plugging in to the current structure of diplomacy around the world so they hit the ground running. And Okay. That was our guest. We got a guest coming on tonight, folks. Pretty exciting one, actually. His name is John Bolenbaugh. He's a big oil whistleblower who has taken on big oil and has cost them billions and billions of dollars by outing them for their crimes against humanity. He's going to join us in about an hour. I'd like you to hear his story, and hopefully you're going to hear things about oil that's gonna just make you going to blow your hair back. Because when I learned his story and learned what he's been through to try to take on this part of the cabal, was just it's actually terrifying in some ways. But anyways, so General Flynn gets quote unquote set up, gets on this call. Now they bust him, of course. They're eavesdropping, doing their wiretapping, whatever they're doing. And now they got him. So they arrest him. Again, what he did was not illegal. It's normal. So he pleads guilty to a crime he didn't commit. Now, here's the thing about General Flynn, is it was a setup. The whole thing was a setup. This military intelligence apparatus already knows the playbook of what the deep state, what the Democrats were going to try to do to remove Trump, so he can't expose to the world all the crime and all the corruption of Washington, D.C., and the deep state and the global power structure. So the reason why Flynn pleads guilty is because now, as he's being deposed, he's required under his plea agreement, in cooperation with the federal government's investigation, he has to disclose everything he knows about the crime he quote unquote committed, in addition to every other single crime he has any knowledge or any information on, as far back as whenever. Now, General Flynn knows where all the bodies are buried. He knows about the cover-up of 911 led by Robert Mueller, the inside job that changed our world forever. He knows about everything to do with the false flag attacks. He knows about Benghazi. He knows about the email scandal. He knows about the Uranium One scandal. He knows about everything. So why does he plead guilty? Well, for moral and superior legitimacy of this takedown operation, everything is being done inside the boundaries of military tribunal law where it applies, and the United States constitutional law where it applies in the Department of Justice. So now Flynn is inside of a room for weeks being deposed, and he is disclosing and deposing everything that he knows about all the crimes, all the criminal actors, all the players involved. And that information now becomes admissible, keyword, admissible in a court of law. That was a baited trap. General Flynn was simply, I don't even know if sacrificial lamb is the right word, but that's what he was acting out. So in this case, now AG Barr is now installing an outside prosecutor to review that case. We know where that's going to go. General Flynn's going to walk. Now, this happened, the whole Roger Stone thing happened, and their refusal to charge Andrew McCabe. Now there's outside prosecutors that are going to review these kind of cases as well. People are going crazy this week because Andrew McCabe, who is even proven in the OIG report to be a liar, among other things, they're not prosecuting him. And I saw the world coming unglued. I had a friend of mine send me a text, and I thought, wow, I better look into this because it happened and I wasn't aware of it yet. But my very first thought was this: I'm not fazed by it. If they're not prosecuting him based on what is in the OIG report, Office of Inspector General report, they're saving him for bigger fish, believe me. Not because I came to that conclusion on my own. These are the military intelligence drops that we are privy to. So another thing, we had, see what else is out there. That's just kind of a rundown, folks. So that being said, those are some of the things that have gone on just in this past week. So there is a lot that is happening under the radar to make sure that everything happens in a sequence and at the level that it needs to happen for this takedown to be thorough, complete, and permanent, where there is no coming back. So what I saw was people's emotions getting in the way of this, the disappointment. And I have folks that I talk to that aren't following this operation. They don't necessarily believe in it, but when they see these things happening or not happening, they usually reach out to me. Well, I thought you said this. I thought you said that. And my response every week is just trust what I'm telling you. There's a process, there's timing. All this is about getting everybody at the top, number one, and number two, exposing the crimes to the people before they make a move for mass arrest. They've got to have the support of the people. What we learned early on from military intelligence is to trust Sessions. We know what Sessions' role was, exactly as what it appeared to be was all played out. There was an investigation uh, into Epstein. He was taken down for a reason, because he is the blackmail machine that they're going to pour on top of all these criminals to show what they're really involved in. There's outside prosecutors assigned on that. All the blocks have been removed from Justice Department, from CIA, from FBI, from every alphabet agency that had all of their installed blocks in there to protect all their people. It has now been wiped out. Since John Bolton's been run out of the White House, same thing. They are clearing up everything that could get in the way of what's coming. We now have the declassification that's going to happen on the FISA application. That's going to set everything in motion. We've got deep state judges. We've got federal judges who participated in approving these blocks. Sandra Collier, I believe her name is. These people are all connected. They all participated in this operation to pass these or to grant these illegal search warrants or surveillance warrants on the Trump campaign and on Ted Cruz and a number of other people. So once that gets put out into the public eye, that's going to set everything rolling. President Trump gave Attorney General Barr the authorization to declassify all this stuff. Now we look at Comey. He's another one. You know, Comey had these leaked memos that ended up causing big problems for Trump. And there was a criminal referral by the Justice Department on that investigation, but he didn't get charged with crimes. Why? Once again, there are bigger slam dunk charges coming. Would you rather go after somebody for lying or leaking information when you can get them for treason? Believe me, they're going for finality here. So let's see what else. We had the Mueller investigation. We, of course, talked about what that is all about. That was an illegal investigation. The FISA applications were illegal. They'll be proved to be such as that. Mueller's investigation is nullified. I believe that Manafort will be released from prison. Anybody who has been imprisoned for whatever in that investigation it's going to be null and void. We got the impeachment. That's going to be fully exposed. CrowdStrike's corruption, you know, Biden's, Ukraine's, everybody I mentioned earlier. The Senate was the key for this whole operation. Swamp is being drained, actually gutted from the ground up. And everything is falling, folks, from our point of view, in place exactly the way it needs to be. The optics are critical. And Barr made a great move this week by not charging Andrew McCabe. Why? He has to look impartial. It's the most important thing. Is if he just starts looking like and appearing to be doing Trump's bidding and being his attack dog to take out his enemies using the law, even though it's just and it's right, doesn't matter. The people won't see it that way that have the opposing opinion. They're going to have to be exposed to all these crimes consistently, methodically, very slowly over time to continue to get them to wake up and join this great awakening. That's really what this is about, folks. This is slow walking, this operation to get people to wake the hell up to what is actually happening. And I'm telling you, of all the research that I've done, certainly in the last 10 years, none of it has come from mainstream media sources online. There's a number of them that I used to use as research channels, even the Drudge Report. But here's what happened to the Drudge Report, especially after Trump's election. I started to see how it started to tilt in a different direction, and it didn't make sense to me for a while. You do some research, then you find out it was bought up by this left-wing organization. What are they doing? They're refashioning the news to fit the general mainstream narrative, which means the truth is no longer coming out. So I'm done with the Drudge Report. So the thing of it is by slow walking this out, people will learn that this was, you can't deny the facts when they come out. Some people will vehemently try to, but in their mind and their heart, it's just going to it's going to eat away at them as more and more of these crimes are exposed from people that they believe in, and it'll eventually have its effect to make them start questioning all the things that we're questioning out here. So there are bigger crimes coming. I'm pretty excited about what's going to happen when Julian Assange gets, I think he's still part of an extradition treaty battle that's happening right now between the US and the UK. But I believe when Julian Assange gets here and they get him to testify either in front of Congress or in a court, we're going to hear everything. We're going to hear how the CrowdStrike investigation on the DNC server, where the Podesta, Hillary Clinton, all these emails were hacked and released to WikiLeaks, wasn't done because of the Russians. That was all made up. We know that too. The top, what would you call him, architect at the NSA for many years, who resigned in protest about 15 years ago, Bill Binney, has proven there's no way that data could have been, based on download or upload speeds, could have ever been transported across that network in the time that it would have taken that much data. It was actually taken from the inside, from somebody in the inside. And of course, we know now that was Seth Rich. And that's what Julian Assange is absolutely, not likely, not maybe, he's going to disclose that's where all that information came from. He was a Bernie Sanders supporter, outing the DNC for stealing the primary away from Bernie for Hillary Clinton. So these arrests are coming. I would say people need to relax a little bit and just enjoy this operation. I'm going to talk about a couple Q posts coming up here because they tie relevance to some of the things I'm talking about, especially what happened in the past week. There's another drop here somebody put out of one of the QAnon drops this week. And it goes like this. People actually believe those responsible for the attempted coup, and inside the brackets, those are the square brackets on your keyboard, which means, could mean a couple things. We call them the kill brackets because that means whatever's in the brackets is targeted for termination in a legal sense. People actually believe those responsible for the attempted coup attempt in the brackets of a duly elected sitting U.S. president will go unpunished, end to our constitutional republic, no equal justice under the law, no accountability, escaped unscathed. Buckle up. That is the drop that came out to let us know nobody escapes. Nobody walks away. Everybody's going to be held accountable for this entire operation. So anyways, we're going to go to the latest Q drops for this week, just so we can tie some of this together. Here we are. Let's see. Drop 3862 talks about Barr's delayed testimony he's going to be testifying in front of the Democrats want him to testify in front of the House because they want to attack AG Barr now, because AG Barr is the next step in this operation to start legally exposing what these people have been involved in. So what do they want to do? They can't impeach Trump. So now they want to impeach someone like AG Barr. So the whole reason that they want to impeach him is because they can stall, shut down these investigations, have somebody else come in, pick it up, can't get enough work done before the election. And what they're hoping is they're going to beat Trump with whoever. I've heard this week Michael Bloomberg may pick up Hillary Clinton. I think it was Dick Morris, former Clinton advisor, sent out a tweet, said if Hillary's going to be on the Bloomberg ticket, Bloomberg might want to hire a taster because we know what that means. If that actually happened and Hillary was on that ticket, we know what happens to Bloomberg. Same thing that H.W. Bush had done to Reagan. Take him out so he can occupy the presidency. And yes, that's exactly what happened. And those are things that you're going to come to learn as well. But that would be it. I mean, we know the Clinton body count is now in the hundreds. Anybody who gets in their way, anybody in the past who's been slated to testify against them. The attorney in Haiti, after the crimes against humanity, against the Haitians, that attorney was supposed to testify 3 days prior to that. He was killed. There was another woman in New Jersey, I think it might have been in Somerville, was going to testify against Hillary. Her entire home blew up that 2 days before, killed her and her husband. I mean, folks, this just goes on and on and on and on. It never stops. Do I think that she's in there doing it herself? Of course not. This is all part of the power structure that they control to make sure they keep people's mouths shut so they can continue to stay in power or fight for their life in this case. Anyways, so that being said, it's not going to happen. I can't imagine. I question Bloomberg. Obviously, he's a pretty bright businessman, but like most of these billionaires in this country, many are involved in nefarious stuff. I'll be interested to see if he gets caught up in the Epstein type stuff in the future. But I mean, look at Bloomberg. I mean, I called him back in the 90s. He was a Democrat. And under Rudy Giuliani in New York City, I would remember being there in 1988 for, I think, or it was before 1988, I was in the Teenage Mr. East Coast Bodybuilding Championships, which I won up there when I was young. And I remember driving through New York City, and it was a hellhole. I remember seeing trash piled literally 10 feet in the air against buildings on the sidewalk. The place was just a crap hole. And after Rudy Giuliani, they cleaned that city up and turned it into a tourist attraction. It was beautiful. And so because the Republicanism was riding high in the 90s after the 94 Republican Revolution, and Rudy in New York City is a Republican, what did Bloomberg do? Bloomberg wanted to become the mayor after Rudy, so he switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party so he could get elected. Well, after he had his 12 years in New York City, I think he did an okay job. There's some ridiculous things he tried to do, social issues, but I don't know, outlawing big gulp soda, those big gulp cups that you get at a mini mart or whatever, because there was too much sugar in them and was making the people who are underprivileged or a little more on the lower side of poverty would make them more unhealthy, whatever. Kind of stupid. They would just buy two of them if they limited how many they could. They can't buy a 32 ouncer. You can only buy 3 12 ounces. It was stupid, but it was political expediency. So now we're back to him running against Trump. So what does he do? He switches back to being a Democrat to run against Trump. But again, imagine Trump being on a debate stage with Bloomberg. Look what he did to Hillary. He put her through an Asplin wood chipper. It was embarrassing. And Bloomberg, it would be a joke. So just so you know, folks, there is no hope that any of these people are going to unseat Trump. I can't imagine I would be wrong about that any more than I knew I was absolutely not wrong about 2016 when I made the call from the day he announced. These people don't have a prayer. You can't look at these. They can't even steal the election, folks, this time. The NSA prevented the rigging of the 2016 election. Admiral Mike Rogers guaranteed Trump that if he did run on behalf of the military, that they would guarantee a fair election, although it was rigged for Hillary to win. I mean, I saw a meme somebody put up with Hillary and Chelsea Clinton once, and it said, "My mother is so stupid she can't even win a rigged election." And how true is that? That's why they were so shocked that she lost, because their rigging mechanisms were put in place, but the NSA shut them down to make sure it was a fair election. So they couldn't even steal this election from Trump with the numbers and what's happening in this country. My God, look at the rallies are staggering. This is the greatest show on earth. I mean, forever. I mean, how many bands could go around for 2 straight years and draw those crowds out every single time they go somewhere? It's crazy. I've never seen anything like it in the 35 years I've been paying attention to politics. It's just the most unbelievable thing ever. These Democrats can't even fill up a telephone booth. It's truly embarrassing. Now, I will say Bernie has definitely filled some big places as of late. Got to give credit where credit is due. He certainly has. But there again, look what the university or the education system has been doing, especially the university system. They're building a legion of socialists, of kids that have no idea what that ideology leads to. They don't have any scope of what history was about. all these years ago when we watched 200 million people being butchered by their own governments over a 100-year period in the name of socialism, forcing people to adopt an ideology by gunpoint. Anyways, it's not completely their fault. So moving on, let me find a couple of interesting. Here's one. There's a tweet that Q put up this past week. They've only dropped the investigation arising from Horowitz's 2018 referral on McCabe. This has nothing to do with Durham's investigation. And so the whole point for bringing that up, again, is to follow up with drop 3865 on the same day, about a half an hour later. There's another tweet comes out by Dan Bongino. A lot of you folks see him on Fox News. So Dan Bongino says, I'm not playing the game until the Durham investigation concludes. I strongly encourage you to do the same. Check this out for more details. And Bongino goes into talking about this trap that the media once again fell into. So Q's comment, again, says bigger in the brackets, slam dunk charges coming. That's a question mark. Q. And again, these drops always are referring to this information in the form of a question. So it's not an absolution. It is making a statement could probably violate national security laws. But if it's a question, it doesn't. But not only that, it has a second purpose. And that second purpose is to get us to think for ourselves and do our own research. So, and there's another tweet or another intelligence drop with a clip of Sean Hannity on Fox News. And Hannity's talking about his sources are confirming that AG Barr is focused on something much bigger for McCabe. And it's going to have deep, far-ranging, serious ramifications for the White House. So this is moving along, folks, exactly like it should. We are nearly at the top of the hour here at 7:55 p.m. Dallas time. We're going to be cutting to a break here within the next minute. So I'm going to start pulling back the reins here. And in just a minute or so, we're going to hear some music. Give us a short break here for about 5 minutes, and then we will be back on to talk for the next half hour about some of Agenda 21, the United Nations Agenda 21. And then I want to bring on our big oil whistleblower, John Bolenbaugh. So let's stand by for a few minutes, folks. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Tipping Point. I'm Scott McKay. I'm your host, and I'm going to be looking forward to sharing the next half hour with you, kind of covering some of the issues of Agenda 21. Some of you have heard of Agenda 21, some have not. By the way, folks, Agenda 21 applies to you in whatever country you're in. We happen to give it a lot of exposure here in the United States because of the foundation of our Constitution and the barriers and firewalls put up in there to protect the people from their own government, vesting the power and control of this country in the population, not the government. So I think we're a lot more keen on these things for the simple reason that we know that our rightful destiny is controlled by we the people and not we the government. Anyways, that being said, Agenda 21 is a blueprint how the elites, wherever they met anywhere in the world, decided they were going to roll out the structure for all of humanity, not themselves, of course, of humanity in whatever fashion they wanted for a couple of purposes. One of the primary purposes is depopulation. You know, folks, again, it always comes back. I always come back to this thought process of how we could have gotten to where we are today, having to deal with issues like Agenda 21. Now, quite honestly, I've had people talk about this probably 10 years ago or a little more. It really didn't get my attention. I was, again, parked on the sidelines for nearly 10 years. And I casually listened. I casually pulled things up on YouTube when YouTube became kind of the hot popular place to go find information. But I really didn't give it much credence. So I can't really point a finger at other people today, how they're so clueless of what's going on, even though it's happening right in plain sight. But Agenda 21 has become more prevalent because inside this structure of how the elite want to govern humanity, they've taken this down to a mechanism whereby they'll roll this out locally instead of from the top down. They know the best way to make this happen is from the bottom up. So they have structured organizations that they would implement on a local basis. Now think about this, how this happens. If they're going to implement some type of agency, and I'm going to roll through here because I found a schematic online researching this where they implement. First, I'm going to cover a couple things. Let me do this first. I don't want to jump ahead of myself here quite yet. I want to give you just an overall viewpoint on what Agenda 21 entails. Now, that's about secret technologies. Bear with me for 1 second. I had written a number of these things down on something. I just got to find out. Oh, I know where they are. I have this habit of putting things in emails to myself, so I never lose my thoughts because somehow they're going to get sent to me. So as I was taking notes today, I'm writing about the agenda of this deep state power structure, and the central bankers, their media machine is Agenda 21. So what they've done to soften us up in preparation for the implementation of getting control of every aspect of humanity and our existence and our development, our evolution, our happiness or unhappiness, our freedoms, whatever, war became their primary mechanism to put us in a state where we live in chaos and our minds are psychologically now developed to accept that as normal. I mean, look at war in general, people, is not the natural order of things. These people, for so many years now, have led us to believe that it even comes from the religious order. Man is a sinner, right? They just teach us man is bad, man is a sinner, man's going to do bad things. I used to think that way. I became a born again Christian at 14 years old. For 20 years, for the next 300 to 325 days a year, I was reading the New and Old Testament every day, nearly every day, for 15 to 30 minutes, and sometimes a whole lot more than that. But to be sold on this idea that, hey, we're just infallible, we're a sinner. Look, folks, in my opinion, God took us as a spiritual being, injected into these physical forms in this particular density of existence on this plane, a dimension called a human being, in this structure of evolution to do what? To live, simply live, and try to learn and make mistakes and not judge each other and as I guess in the Bible it talks about judge not lest ye be judged. Quite honestly, I'm a big proponent of logic and reason. I mean, I got to judge everything. I got to judge somebody's character when I meet them, but I want to do business with them. So we're always sitting in judgment of somebody, and we're always in judgment of somebody. But I think when we're looking at in terms of judgment from a spiritual perspective, we just happen to think that automatically man is bad because we're told we're a sinner. I don't necessarily consider it being sins to make mistakes. They're just experiences that the God consciousness is experiencing through us. Hopefully, we make mistakes that when we do make them, and we can feel on some quantum spiritual level that this isn't naturally good for my ascension, and it's not good for the outcome on other people or other people's lives. Therefore, I would like to move or think or act in an opposite direction. But I think a lot of that came the initial foundation of believing man is bad from that religious order of control. I'm not talking about the purity of Christ's philosophy, which has been watered down over hundreds of thousands of years now. I mean, if you look on a quantum level, if you look at kinesiological testing that they've done, there's a great book called Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. He's an MD, PhD, quantum physicist. And he talks about how they've calibrated damn near everything in terms of philosophies or ideas. And they can do this kinesiologically. And you wouldn't understand it unless you had some background in quantum physics on how that really works in our realm of life. But they've calibrated the highest level of 1,000 would have been someone like Christ or Buddha or Muhammad. But over the course of time, the calibration level has fallen because the powers that be have watered down the authenticity of Christ's message down to about 700. So by leaving certain things out and what would I say, distorting aspects of his philosophy, it's really muddied the waters for us. But I think that's where it started. And then we just think that we're always going to be bad. There's always going to be bad thoughts and bad things done to other people. That's not the natural order of what we are. I don't believe that on any level. I did, but through my life experience and what I've learned about the general aspects of life on many realms, man is inherently good. It's the examples of the matrix and this structure, or this whatever their own continuum is that they forced us into, creates us to operate in a realm that is contrary and oppositional to the laws of man and the laws of nature. So anytime you work against the laws of man, there's disruption. Things are going to go wrong. When you try to work against the laws of nature, the laws of the universe, the laws of physics, you're going to lose every time. There's no maybes in, I'm going to defy gravity, so I'm going to jump off a building, and guess what? I'm going to fly, I'm going to do whatever. Now, I got to preface that with a belief I have on a level of human consciousness. Can you defy that law of gravity? Yes. Yes. But you and I would have to have had gone through the ascension of our consciousness to the level that Christ did when he walked on water, when he put his hands on people to heal them instantly, or raising Lazarus from the dead. Some people think that's just myth, fantasy. I probably did in my religious studies at some point in my life. I don't anymore, because I've been studying just for the last year and a half ascension. And I can now clearly see things that I couldn't see in the past. But that being said, war has been an amazing weapon they've used to get us to believe that killing is good. I don't even watch movies anymore. I went to a movie for the last 20 years at least once a weekend. Typically twice a weekend I'd go see a movie, because the theater having a bunch of candy and garbage is always just my entertainment while I'm watching a movie. I can't watch them anymore, because all they do is kill human beings. Virtually every movie, I don't care if it's Spider-Man or if it's, I don't know, there's some good ones I've seen recently. The Avengers, the last one, part 3, I saw it's fantastic special effects, and there's a high side of humanity to it that I'm inspired by. But most of these things are just killing humans. If we grow, our kids grow up seeing nothing but that on TV, in movies, in these video games, these horrific video games, kill. What do you think is going to happen? That's what they've done. That's what they've done to us, to soften us up to the point where they could move us into this 21st century structure. I do want to tell you about a video I saw this past weekend from a rap artist that was disclosing a meeting that happened, I believe it was in the late 80s or early 90s, back when rap was pure. MC Hammer back in the 80s. This rapper, I hate to put black and rap together, because we got white rappers. They're nowhere as good as our brothers and sisters, because they just have that natural rhythm of music and dance and all those things that white boys like me aspire to have, just like the athletic ability and some of the greatest talents. But it was amazing to listen to this rapper talk about this meeting in Los Angeles. It's somebody's home that was very powerful, either in the business world or the music industry. But there was about 25 of the top rappers of that time that were invited to this meeting. Once they got there were men, basically men in black, men in suits. And while they were waiting to get this meeting started, nobody really knew what it was about. They just knew that they were picked out as the top 25 rappers to basically help set the stage where rap was what it was going to evolve into the future as a business. And so they were all asked to sign an NDA. And about half of them like, what the hell am I going to, what's this all about? I'm not going to sign some type of non-disclosure for something I don't even know what we're going to talk about. So a number of them just get up to leave, and a few others went outside, followed them to find out why they were leaving. Inevitably, some decided to come back in, and the rest of them left. Those who did sign heard what horrified them. What was explained to them was that there was these very wealthy investors, these businessmen that, and I'm going to try to get to Agenda 21 here, folks. I just get onto things that grab my attention from the prior week's worth of research that I have to share with you. But these businessmen wanted the music executives to explain to these rappers that they wanted rap to go down a certain alley of destruction in lyrics, and these are my words, destruction in lyrics and the mindset that they would build. And here's why, folks. Because these investors had invested into private prisons, privately owned prisons, and they needed to make sure that these prisons would remain full or could fill up, so they would make good on their investments in privately held or owned prisons. And they felt that rap music was the best way to do it. Now, imagine being in that setting, in that meeting, and being told that this very vibrant genre of music that everybody got swept up in the 80s, it just had a very special beat to it, an energy to it that we have never seen before, probably one of the greatest modern day creations of music, when the lyrics were pure and when it was fun. And I'm leaving out some great artists, but MC Hammer's the one that comes to mind, to where now they came into this gangster rap. They talk about, pardon my language, but bitches and hoes and degrading women in a horrible way, and talking about their private parts and dropping F-bombs and shooting cops and all this stuff to do what? Produce generations of people that would do things in life that would put them in prison so they can make good on these horrible people's business investments. This is the stuff that they've done to humanity, people. Okay, it's what they've done. So, anyways, all of this stuff has created this scenario or this dynamic of the life and a world we live in where we're out of control and they're in. So you look at someone like Agenda 21, something like this planning committee that 148 countries have signed on to. This comprehensive plan of action, it's going to be taken globally, nationally, and then locally. Bring humans under the control of this very narrow human elite. And it's all based on socialist control mechanisms of ending national sovereignty, abolition of private property, restricting the family unit in many ways, limitations of mobility and opportunity. They're talking about building railway lines with these massive skyscrapers where we would be herded into them. So when they wanted to transport us anywhere, there's rail lines we would get on. Sounds like Auschwitz to me and some of these death camps. But all of these buildings that they would herd us into in the future to get us out of rural agricultural areas. In fact, one of the things that stunned me about that, see if I can find it. There is one of the things in these bylaws that if you're one of these contractors that have a sustainable development accreditation, then your company is immune from any construction defects or liabilities that could cause any injury to anybody living in these things. There was a test zone. Santa Cruz, California was given $300 million to kick this thing off, to build these high rises along railway lines, stack them and pack them as one. I mean, this is just crazy stuff. Children being cared for by the state. Here's things they consider not sustainable: private property, golf courses, ski lodges, herbicides and pesticides, fossil fuels, which I'm not totally against elimination of, because we've got plenty of technologies that can replace that. Consumerism, farmlands, pastures, grazing and livestock, irrigation, the family unit, put humans in human settlement zones. Bill Clinton even established the President's Council for Sustainable Development by executive order back in the 90s. H.W. Bush signed this agreement for our country without our authorization, even Senate authorization. Then Bill Clinton creates an executive order council to get us to start having to follow through with this. In fact, here's one of the things I saw written in this platform for sustainable development. It says, generally, more highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. Let me read this again, folks. Generally, More highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. To sustainability, how about the threat to global control? What did Pol Pot do in Cambodia around the time of the Vietnam War? Slaughtered 3 million people. Who are those people? Doctors, lawyers, engineers. Get out through the list. All the educated professionals were killed, slaughtered. Why? Because they were independent thinkers who could form an opinion and form a voice and form a philosophy and form a movement of the less educated people to overthrow these dictatorial socialist murderers and criminals like Pol Pot. That's what Agenda 21 is all about. But folks, I'm going to tell you something. The high side is they're not going to win. They're not going to win. I assure you, they're not going to win. All the tea leaves are showing this. I spent some time I mentioned this a couple of times, doing some research about the secret space programs, and have had conversations with some people that are part of the exposure media. And it's amazing what's coming. Here's an example. I don't know where I found this, but this was something that was said by a guy named Ben Rich. He was a second director of Lockheed Skunk Works. And Skunk Works, as you know, is that top secret project area they have out at Area 51, where they have all these amazing technologies. This is what he says during a 1993 alumni speech at UCLA. We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. He said, anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. He's stating something in 93 that I didn't even hear until 2017. There are things that are in motion, people, in terms of technologies that are going to make your life, the lives of everybody on earth, immeasurably better like we've never imagined. We're talking about anti-gravitic technology, which Nikola Tesla cracked the code on that. Of course, after he died, the federal government went and stole all of his work, burned down his laboratory. They couldn't have that getting out. Couldn't he crack the code on 0-point energy, free energy? There's free energy devices the size of a small globe you can set on a table and power your house for free, because there's enough energy in a cubic centimeter around your head that can power the whole country for a year. That's a quantum realm of energy. They don't want this getting out. What would happen to big oil? What would happen to coal? What would happen to natural gas? It's one of the reasons I have John Bolenbaugh, the big oil whistleblower from up in Michigan, going to call on our show in about 8 or 9 minutes. I want you to hear his story, because he's seen the reality of it and seen the damage coming our way because of big oil, what's happened to his life, his town. But we're talking, folks, about sonic healing technologies. These aren't maybe things. These aren't futuristic things. These are today things that exist, that once this dismantling, annihilation, and extermination of this satanic global power structure is finished in the very near future, this is what's going to break out onto the surface of the planet. That's going to stop the madness. That's going to level the playing field so everybody on earth can enjoy life in a way that makes living worthwhile on any level of human experience. All these things are in motion. And I know there are people out there that couldn't possibly see anything like this, especially those people that are oppositional to my viewpoint on what the world or what the political landscape is, or what's going on in Washington or this administration. It's going to work for everybody. It's going to make things incredible for all of us. It's just oftentimes tough for me to sit back and just look at the destruction of relationships and the battles going on between people, between the races, between the religions, between the ages, between the sexes, all by design, that don't know what's happening. that don't understand that there is a man who is earmarked for a very specific reason to, I don't know if I'd say provide the way or lead the way, but provide the way for very powerful business, political, and military leaders to execute a plan to destroy this power structure that's limiting the experience of life on earth and the ability for us to ascend in a spiritual way, which is the reason why we exist here on this realm in the first place. The most important reason. They have stopped it all. They have limited it all for a very long time. The sun is setting on that power structure. So I can tell you that the things I've talked about in terms of these secret technologies are right around the corner, people. And I'm very excited about it because it's like living a dream. Once I started to follow this operation, understand what's going on, I finally reached some level of peace where I don't fret every day about the future for necessarily myself, but certainly all of humanity, because it's going to change in a very substantial way. Just got to have the faith, trust the planet's rolling out. These people thought about this for a very long time. They've been planning the final takedown phase for the last 20 years, and they're executing it in the face of every single contingency that could possibly happen and the counter moves made by this deep state power structure. And there are mystery guests that I believe are going to come onto the scene when this thing breaks wide open, and the parts that's going to shock the world, shock humanity, and some of the people they're going to take down right out in the open. I believe the mystery guests that are going to be revealed to the world are going to be it's going to be so shock. I know who I believe they are. Is going to be so shocking to the planet that just the idea that they exist, people, humans, that they even exist, is going to give credence and credibility to the validity of this operation and this takedown, because I think it'll be the single most mind-blowing event in human history, maybe human recorded history, certainly in our lifetime. Absolutely. I'm excited for that to take place. And I'm going to reach out right now and see if we can bring in John Bollenbaugh, the big oil whistleblower, see if we can get him here on our line and have a discussion with what he's doing on his battlefield now of taking on big energy and big oil. Just stand by, see if we can get him on the phone. John, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, welcome to the show. It's here we are again Monday night, and I was just talking tonight, John. I don't know if you were listening on the show, but I was talking about the latest evolution of the takedown of this power structure, and of course, one of the main financial arms of the power structure is big energy. And just the fact that you have been on the firing lines in the fight on the battlefield against big energy for how many years has it been? 8 or 10 years now against these people?
Since 2010.
2010. Okay, so you're almost 10, about 10 years into it. So anyways, folks, I want to tell you a little bit about John Bollenbaugh, and I want to bring up some of the things that are happening today in his battle against one of the deep state's biggest money makers. The big three are big pharma, drugs, human trafficking, and of course, big oil. And John worked for a company called Enbridge out of Canada, and he comes from a family that works in the oil industry. Some really good people working executive level positions who still are in that industry, but there was a pipeline break up in, I believe it might have been in Canada, but it spilled out into the Kalamazoo River and did untold damage to that entire region. And of course, there was a major cover up by Enbridge and also the EPA, federal government agencies, to cover this whole thing up and leave the destruction of that entire area to lay waste on not just the land, but the communities and the horrific things that started to happen to people, the terrible things, the deaths, the epileptic seizures and things that were happening in mass that John got to witness and document. and put into a documentary that he's put on his website, which I'm sure he'll share, that caught my attention. And when I saw this story, in fact, I saw it after I met John, but I met John at an event that I was having in Los Angeles a number of years back. And we met, and that night we talked John into coming to an event in Dallas here that was going to take him away from his family, his family vacation. But he talked his wife into coming along anyways and disrupting their first vacation in many years to speak. And it was incredible what he shared with us. But I wanted to salute John because he truly is one of those heroes that couldn't be bought off by big oil. He couldn't refuse to take $50 million payoff to keep his mouth shut. And of course, they've put a serious squeeze on his financial life and made attempts on his physical safety a number of times, but he still stays on the firing line. So John, welcome to the show. It's glad to have you here. And if you wouldn't mind taking just a few minutes and talk about that series of events that happened 10 years ago that caused you to draw a line in the sand and make your own stand. And then after we share a little bit of that, I'd like to talk about what's happening with the Keystone Pipeline, the battle you've been in with the native tribes up there in the northern part of the country to try to stop that, and why you're trying to stop that, what the repercussions are, not just to our native tribes, but what happens in the entire country if that project is not stopped, which, by the way, I was all for it. I didn't understand. I was a big energy guy. I didn't understand until I met you and you explained to me the great threat of what happens as a weapon that can be used against us with the pipeline and as such. So anyways, folks, I want to introduce you to my friend John Bolenbaugh from Michigan.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate everything you do, Scott. Boy, the knowledge that you've taught me so many things in the last few years. I've known some things from other whistleblowers and some military friends, but you know more than almost anybody that I know. And so thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for, being on this show prior to my show that starts here at 10 p.m. Eastern. And we had an open spot, and they asked me, the radio show, Revolution Radio, they said, John, do you know anybody that could do a really good radio show podcast? And I said, of course. I said, my buddy Scott, he's amazing. And so you just know that you're making a difference.
Thank you for those kind words, John.
All right. So I'm going to get into a little bit about who I am and how I started. My whole family works for oil companies, and I worked on the Keystone 1 pipeline, which is down through Canada, North Dakota, South Dakota, all the way down to Texas. And it goes down to a refinery, and that oil from Canada is then processed because it's too toxic to refine in Canada, so they have to send it to the United States to refine it. Once it's here, we send it to China. And so I started working on that pipeline, some other pipelines. My family are really high up in the oil industry. And the largest inland oil spill in history happened in my hometown of Marshall and Battle Creek, Michigan. And I was down in Florida, vacation time. I was single at the time, and I drove up immediately. I drove overnight, 19-hour drive, and I got there, and it was just, you could smell the fumes for 30 miles from the oil spill. It was everywhere. And I didn't know at the time that this was poisoning the whole community. But Enbridge falsified 100 air sample tests, and nobody knew about the falsification for years until I, discovered this. And I was just a normal worker. I was a union guy, and then they made me a head supervisor for the spill. And then I was seeing a cover-up. They literally were bringing hundreds of dump trucks full of rocks, bringing them in, putting them over the top of the oil. Then they were bringing dirt, putting over the top of the rocks. Then they were bringing a brown canvas, and it had grass seed that was modified to grow an oil. And it was GMO. And so I learned a lot the hard way. And I was seeing a cover-up so massive that after I reported the cover-up, and I actually spent 2 years every single day, 365 days a year, whether it was 100 degrees out, or it was below zero, I was out there looking for oil. I was very passionate about documenting all this because I figured I was going to be murdered pretty soon. I was just waiting for a bullet to go through my head because there was a lot of the Gulf whistleblowers that came up dead or missing. And so I knew it was going to happen to me. I was just waiting. So every night I would upload my footage so people could see it. I wasn't trying to make a documentary. I wasn't trying to become popular. I was just trying to get the truth out there. And as a result of what I did over that 2-year period, EPA was forced to re-clean up that river because of the bad publicity and all the proof I had. As a result, they forced Enbridge to re-clean it up, and it costed Enbridge an extra $600 million on top of what they already spent because they said it was clean. People have to understand that they said the river was clean, 90% clean, and there was about 62 areas, and they said about 50 of them, 55 of them was clean. They signed off on them. They had 3 supervisors from Enbridge, the oil company, 3 supervisors from the EPA, and 1 from DEQ. So you have 7 top supervisors signing off on these areas before I proved that the oil is covered up and buried.
John, I just want to interject.
Go ahead.
I want to interject one thing about that. That part of the cover up that I saw that was it was astonishing to me to see this, what looked like to be football fields size pools of oil that were waist deep that weren't even evident because grass had grown up. And when I saw you getting in there with your fishing waders on up to your chest, not the oil level was up that high, but you had those on and you're wading through this and you're pulling back what looked like sort of mesh or burlap type of mesh that you said they just laid out over all of this oil, this basically these small lakes laid out over top of it. And then they threw a ton of grass seed in there that would filter down through the oil and down in the water in the bottom. And then it would cause this grass to grow up through the water and through the oil, which would basically, maybe not from an aerial view, possibly from an aerial view, but certainly from a ground eye view, would make it look like there was nothing there except swamp grass everywhere. That's what it looked like to me. Is that the cover up you're talking about? The EPA cover up?
I mean, just one area was a 2-mile creek, and literally it was about 40 foot wide of the cover up because there was a flood. And when the flood happened, the oil went everywhere. It went into the Kalamazoo River. It went 40 miles downstream. It went into the swamps. It went all the way to Lake Michigan, which they're denying that, but I have a lot of proof that it went into poison Lake Michigan, and Chicago drinks that water. And so tar sand oil is a little different than what we use in our car. People were thinking, oh, you can clean it up. It floats on top. You can soak it up. No, tar sand oil is not even on the viscous scale of 1 to 10. It's too thick. It's like peanut butter. And it actually sinks to the bottom of the river or in the swamps. And so you really don't know it's there. And you have to actually, you have to take water and force it into the mud to release a lot of this oil. And they left it there. And until I proved that this oil was left in the river and the creek was full of oil and it was all covered up, and we're talking about hundreds of miles of pollution that went all the way to Lake Michigan. And we're talking about 40 miles of major cover up where the oil went into the swamps and they just buried the oil instead of cleaning it up. And as I said, $600 million they had to spend to re-clean up areas that they said were signed off, 100% clean. They landscaped it, planted grass over it, and they told the news it was clean. Now, what they did once they got caught, they actually in the court system said, oh, that was phase 2. Well, obviously, anybody with any logic at all is going to understand that you do not plant grass over contaminants, and you do not landscape it and make it look all beautiful and tell the news it's clean and tell the landowners it's clean and sign off on it, and then come back and redig it all up. It's not logical. And so that's how I pretty much, in the public eye, proved it from my little, and I had a little BlackBerry phone, one of those back in the day when that was a big deal. That was an awesome phone, but compared to what they are nowadays when it comes to footage, that was horrible. And that kind of proves they had no plan on making a documentary about this. And I heard you talking about, how oil, how you didn't realize how bad this is. I'm not against oil, everybody. I drive an RV like everybody else that gets 5, 6, 7 miles a gallon, depends on going uphill or what. And I'm not against oil. I'm against knowing that these pipelines have leaks in them, and they refuse to fix them because they would rather lose that 1 or 2% because no alarm will go off. They would rather lose that revenue from that 1 or 2% instead of shutting the pipeline down for a year and losing $10 million a day in revenue and have to spend money to fix the pipe.
John, didn't
They
you
would
say
ra-
that? Didn't you say the government, the EPA, has like an acceptable level of leakage that's okay to go into the ground, which gets into the water table, which ends up getting into the water supply that causes this illness? Didn't you say that there's an acceptable level the government allows?
1.5 to 2% is the acceptable level. And when I say acceptable, it's because nobody knows it's leaking. They're underground, and the sensors will not go off unless there's more than 1.5 or 2% loss in pressure. So when it's a 500,000 barrel a day pipeline, and most barrels are 55 gallons, so you're talking about a lot of oil per day. When you're talking about even a 0.5%, you're talking about thousands and thousands of gallons between Canada and Texas that are leaking out every day into your wells,
So
into the lakes, into the rivers, and nobody knows about it, not even the oil company.
let's do the math on that. 500,000 barrels. Did you say a day?
Yep.
Okay,
And each barrel is 55 gallons.
So that's 500. That's 5 million times five. That's 25 million barrels a day, gallons a day, right? Now let's just talk about one day, and 1% of that is what? 25. 2,500. Let's see. What did I say? 25 million gallons a day, right?
So 1% would be what? 25,000.
250,000 gallons.
Oh, that was way
250,000 gallons. Every single day are pouring into the ground and heading for the water table. We wonder why these things have skyrocketed over the last 30 years. I grew up in an area in central Pennsylvania, which is coal country. That's the backbone of our economy. When my mother passed away, John, I might have told you this once, but when my father called the insurance company in Atlanta to, do the life insurance stuff, they asked the zip code, and he told them, and they said, "Oh, you're in the cancer belt." He said, "What?" The lady said, "You're in the cancer belt." He said, "What do you mean by that?" She goes, "Well, you have the highest per capita cancer rates in the nation right there in that county." We're like, no wonder. It seems like 1 out of 3 people there are getting cancer, and it has to do with coal. There's been mine breaches with springs and whatnot that have polluted, everything in that area. But, so we know the repercussions of that with coal. Now we're looking at oil. And again, I'm like you. I still want to drive, and I want to fill my Harley Davidson tank up with gas. But here's the thing, and you and I both know this. We've had anti-gravitic technology for a long time. We've had 0-point energy technology already on this planet for a long time. They don't want us to have this, because what happens is big energy goes away overnight. Roads, with anti-gravitic technology, we don't need roads. We don't need asphalt. We don't need we don't need all this infrastructure when you have these kind of technologies. But there again, the powers that control these energy sources, guess what? They make no money. It goes away overnight.
Exactly.
So,
it's revenue in the ground, and they consider that profit in the future. And they used to buy solar companies back in the day. Enbridge bought one here in Michigan, and they were like, this dude was like, "Oh, I told you they really care." Well, guess what? A year later, they fired him and everybody else, and they closed the company down, and no longer had solar anymore from that company. And they do this stuff on purpose. They've been buying engines that run on water for years, buying the patents, and then they kill the person, or they just throw the patent in some safe somewhere nobody knows about.
Yeah, they buy them and shelve them. They buy technologies like this, then they shelve it. They buy the rights, and then they shelve it so it can never get out.
And so there's a couple things that I uncovered with the oil industry. They profit from these oil spills. Instead of them losing that 10 million a day to shut the pipeline down and fix it because they know it's all cracked and leaking, they literally will get extensions to postpone the work, which they did in Michigan for 5 years. and they knew it was leaking. It had 92 cracks in it. But what they wanted to do is wait that 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whenever it's going to blow up and spill. Normally it's a lot smaller than it was. And they would normally dig it up in the middle of the night or cover it up in the middle of the night at some farmer's place. News will never know about it, but they get paid by the insurance company to clean up their own mess. They own the cleanup companies, they own the cleanup materials, and they raise the gas prices in the local area 30 to 50 cents a gallon, and they say there's a shortage of oil, which they're lying to everybody. As a result, they're making $2 to $3 billion profit by not fixing pipelines that are leaking. The other thing I've learned is the Keystone One, and I know me and you've talked about this. Back in the day, I didn't really understand all this, but just like you. But now I know that because I worked on the pipeline called Keystone One. Keystone One was a pipeline by TransCanada. I actually helped make that pipeline going all the way up to Canada. Well, they want to make another extension of that pipeline called XL. And they want to go through the largest aquifer in the United States. There is no logical sense in that. And this is why. They already own an easement. They can put 2 or 3 pipelines through an easement. They do not need to cut corners and go through this aquifer that actually is very hard to do because you have to bore under the whole entire thing. The problem is you're still going to mix the oil and water together. Here's the other thing. What I believe from documents I've seen, TransCanada is actually owned by China. And that was groundbreaking. We didn't know about that. We found out that the majority of TransCanada is owned by China. Then we found out there's documents saying that China wants the water. So they can literally, because they own an easement through that aquifer, they legally, Lake Nestle, can suck water out of the Great Lakes, or in this situation, the largest aquifer we have. They can ship it down to Texas through pipeline, then they can literally ship it to China. And water is worth more than oil now. Go to Vegas, you're paying $5 for a bottle of water. This is the beginning of that. We're going to have literally wars over water in the future. And so the scary thing is, and I was on C-SPAN 9 years ago, and I actually was in D.C., and I told everybody this is a national security threat. If China or some other country, terrorists, want to blow up 3 or 4 major pipelines going through the Great Lakes, why do we have pipelines going through the Great Lakes? Ridiculous. We have pipelines going through the largest aquifer in the United States. And we have the Missouri River, Mississippi. If they blow up 4 or 5 pipelines, we literally are going to lose 98% of American fresh water in one single day. You can't drink it, can't plant crops with it, can't give it to the animals. We literally are going to lose most of our water in one single day. And so we should not have these pipelines anywhere near water sources that large or that massive, because it's an easy way for some terrorist or terrorist group or country to literally try to take us out.
I know one thing is for sure in this entire this battle, this global covert war that's going on to take down this deep state cabal. The Rothschild family obviously is a key player in that, because they own, all the central banks in the 225 countries where there are central banks. And I've heard they're worth well over $100 trillion, but military intelligence, probably through NSA, has the threat that Linda de Rothschild made to destroy the U.S. water supply as a countermeasure for the attacks that are coming their way. So there's no question that can be a weapon. One thing that and I don't want to take any thunder from your message, because there's no question that if moves were made like that, there would be incredible disruption on the safety of people. But I also have learned from the secret space program, military whistleblowers, that they do have technologies that can clean up the planets, like quantum field technologies that can clean up and deactivate radioactive waste and make it completely inert, clean up the oceans, clean up water, clean up everything And I don't know how it works. If it dematerializes these type of pollutants or, certain compounds or whatever. But I always like to leave the show as I'm painting this cloud over our reality to wake people the hell up to what's really going on. I always like to leave them with the high side of what we have coming in the future. So I think it's important that people do know that those technologies do exist. I certainly believe that they're parked on the sidelines at some measure. So when it's necessary to deploy them, in a rapid response situation, they're probably ready to go. But if not, it's still going to create terrible disruption. Lives are still going to be lost, uh, if and when things go south in the pipeline industry. Just based on some of the things you're describing there, there's no question that there's going to be damage. Can it be catastrophic? Yeah, but I believe that every aspect and measure of this battle for Earth is well planned out, well thought of, every
Oh
contingency
yeah.
to try to help that from happen. But unfortunately, in the meantime, we'll call it, the short-term damage catastrophes from this can happen. I think your ability to point out the evils of these people that do not care but what happens to their fellow human beings is to me is every day is mind-boggling. you
Well,
know
I think they want to depopulate, and even if they can clean it up, like you said, they don't want to, or maybe they want to kill off, 60% of the world and then clean it up
well
and
they
then
did
start from new.
well those people that want to depopulate the planet, they're not in the game of cleaning anything up. They're in the game of destruction, and that means destruction of humanity to levels that they can control, more easily control, but also destruction of the environment itself, because they have their Noah's Ark. And these are things that I don't think society is yet ready to hear on a large scale, of things that I learned over the last couple of years. But their Noah's Ark, so to speak, places where they can escape to are places we can only dream about that exist now. So they don't care about the surface here. You hear about these deep underground military bases. They call them DUMBs, that are literally massive, massive underground cities that have a view that I think if we all saw what they have been building with our hundreds of trillions that they've been stealing for generations, we would say, "My God, I want to be there." So they're not worried about destroying the planet. That's all part of their agenda. That's exactly falls in the realm of who they are and what they live for. What their this energy field that they live within, this satanic continuum that they are part of. And it's like, that's why Vladimir Putin, John, has said many times publicly on the world stage, the new world order worships Satan. And
Oh yeah, I have somebody that I've had contact with that works out to Bilderberg, and she's been there for 18 years, and she said that they really do these rituals. She hasn't seen them herself, but she knows that other people, the other staff, have said it's true, that they kill kids and babies
yeah,
and do these rituals and these sick things. But she's scared us out. She doesn't probably shouldn't even be talking about this, but like she's scared. She's scared to be murdered
well,
if she ever says anything to anybody.
she should be. But look, I don't shy away from that topic. There is a global child satanic ritual abuse pedophile ring that the elite around the world are involved in. That's why you've seen 8,500 plus high level CEOs of major corporations have retired or resigned or left over the last 22 months or 26 months. There are things going on where people are now on the run. By the way, we're about 8:55 after the hour, and at 8:55, 55 minutes after the hour, I know you have a show coming up on Studio B right here after me at 9 o'clock. So if people want to join in and listen to John's show, certainly it's a great medium to him to extend this conversation. But I will tell you, John, there is a child human trafficking takedown machine is in full swing. It's been announced by the Trump administration just this past week, and the massive resources they're putting into taking down what they're going after. So that was Jeffrey Epstein's whole purpose for being rearrested. This is what's going to blow this thing wide open for people to start lining up and calling for the heads of the elite once and for all to take down these criminals and basically free humanity. But so listen, it's great to talk to you again. Glad to have you on the show, and I'll have to have you come on again here in the very near future so we can expand on some of these topics. I'd like people to hear this ongoing battle that you have been taking to the big oil industry. And thank you for your heroics. And, we're always praying for you. And the website they can find you before we get cut off here, John, is
helpa.org. Spell help, PA, help Pennsylvania, but it's actually
help.
Honor environment, love people, protect all. And I think you're going on break real soon. So I love you, Scott. Thanks for listening to the show tonight, guys. Have a good night.
Same to you, John, and go see his website and watch the documentary. It'll shock you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending another evening here of The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio. Again, this is Free Speech Radio. We do appreciate your support.